in that book, haven't you?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. 1915 to 1921. Okay. Okay, I'll show it in a minute. You have two of us on together, is it? Okay, that's grand. So now I'm welcoming Michael Galvin, and he's going to tell us all about a talk he's going to give here in Macroom Library shortly. Michael, you're something of an expert on the 1916 Rising, and I know you've written a book on the topic. Now, can you give us some sense of what that talk will be about and when it's coming up?
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert. I'm a student of the Rising and
Yes.
of history, not an expert. What I'll be talking about is Friday. I won't be talking about a blow-by-blow account of the Rising. Rather, I want to take a different approach. I want to talk about the different takes on it, the different angles. I'll be talking about the Unionist angle, the British angle, the angle of the Irish volunteers, the American angle, the German angle. The Rising was a very complex event, and it needs a certain amount of elaboration. It was not a simple event, it was very complex, and also there are a few myths associated with the Rising which I want to explore and explode. So I think that it will be an attempt to inform the public rather than the usual blow-by-blow account of the Rising.
Okay.
And because it was a very complex event, in other words.
Right. And just coming into, I suppose, people will have a particular interest in what's happening at local level. I suppose there's a lot of coverage on television
Yes,
at the moment
yes.
of the national picture.
Yes.
And indeed, RT are doing a very good job on all aspects of the Rising.
Yes.
I was watching something last night on the Harry Clark windows, the cultural
Yes.
background to all of this
Yes.
kind of tool, you know. But anyway, that's just an aside. Michael, what happened around here? Give me some sense of where things happened, and without the details, where
Yes,
things happened
yes.
and who was involved.
Well, the major event in the Macroom area, of course, had to do with the casement shipment landing, the German ship arms landing in Kerry. So that Macroom was the focus of that saga because the volunteers were supposed to collect and distribute the arms that were supposed to come into Kerry. And there was a major rendezvous in Beal-na-Blah. Beal-na-Blah became famous before it did, in that sense, that the entire Cork City companies of volunteers and all the southern companies, Kilbrittain, Balhassig, all them out there, Bandon, all them out there, they rendezvoused in Beal-na-Blah. They marched, the city companies came off the train at Crookstown and they marched to Beal-na-Blah. They met all the southern companies and they joined there for about 400 men. And they jointly then marched through Kilmurray and into Macroom, and they paraded in Macroom to rendezvous in Carriganema then to get because the other companies are bringing the arms on there from that side. And then there was another rendezvous in Inchigeela. And in the North Cork then companies rendezvoused in North Cork, all to collect the arms, 20,000 rifles and ammunition and so on, a few machine guns, to distribute across the country. But then, of course, when the Rising was called off, on Saturday, it was on Sunday's paper to be called off for various reasons, the rendezvous went ahead, but news reached Macroom on Easter Sunday that the Rising was called off, so the entire companies were dismissed and dispersed.
And this was all McNeill's countermand.
That's right.
Orders. And
That's
they
right.
got here in time enough to stop things happening.
Well,
To a large extent.
it was very complicated there because the Irish volunteers under Owen McNeill, they didn't envisage a Rising themselves straight away, but the IRB did, of course. And the IRB were ingrained into the Irish volunteers. The IRB were an elitist Fenian Republican movement, a minority movement who did a solo run.
That was O'Donovan Ross's
Yes,
people, wasn't
and
it?
Pierce,
Yeah.
Patrick Pierce and so
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
They did a bit of a solo run, which they were used to doing anyway, and did later on with Michael Collins, who became president of the IRB later on. They were used to doing their own elitist solo runs, and that's what happened. The Rising was called off on Easter Sunday because of the failure, or Holy Saturday, because of the failure of the arms shipment.
Right.
In fact, Casement came to Ireland to call off the Rising to get it called off, because he knew the Germans had lost interest in the whole thing. They did send rifles, okay, but he knew it'd fail. So then, when Lord McNeil called off the Rising, um, Patrick Pierce and McDonough and them, they did a solo run in Easter Monday.
Yes.
So then, when the Rising was called off, then the great rendezvous in Macroom was dismissed,
Yes.
and they returned home. That was the main event that
Yes.
happened here.
And just very specifically, do we have any sense? I remember I've quoted this before on local television, and I noticed Donla Mahuna quoted it in an interview he gave to Con Kelleher in the Lee Valley.
Yes.
She done da ballet scolde in earring na dengen I Coosh agus Macrome. The two most foreign towns in Ireland are Dingle and Macroom. Now, do we know specifically in the town of Macroom if there were a lot of volunteers or if there were few volunteers? I mean, given that it was dominated by the castle and by, you know, the jobs were coming off the castle, do we have any specific information on that?
Well, that is a very complex subject as well, because you must bear in mind that the 1910 general election, the Home Rule Party, Redmond's party, the vast majority of the people voted for the Home Rule Party, the Irish Parliamentary Party in 1910 for Home Rule, not anything else. So that the thinking, the political thinking before 1916 was Home Rule.
Yes, yes.
And indeed, the people of Macroom are no different anywhere else. In fact, when after the Rising, Macroom Urban District Council passed a resolution condemning the Rising. And but when the executions took place, the Macroom Urban District Council thought that was going to step too far. But they were very cautious in their condemnations of the executions.
Yes.
Because at the time, it was regarded, the executions were regarded as normal enough. Because you must bear in mind that Ireland technically was at war.
Yes.
With a very bitter enemy, the Germans. Ireland was part of England, and there was tens of thousands of Irishmen fighting in the trenches. So the rebels, by many people, were regarded as traitors.
Yes.
They were creating an insurrection in the middle of a world war.
Yes.
So that the execution of the leaders, contrary to popular perception, the execution of the leaders was not regarded as that abnormal.
Yes.
It was regarded as quite normal. But what happened was that there were 16 executed. There were 7 signatories. If many historians now think that if there was 2 or 3 executed, to be more or less forgotten about.
Yes, yes. Now,
Macroom, Cork Bend and all these towns, Skibbereen, Dermanway, they were very conservative thinking. They were home rulers. They were Redmondites by and large.
Yes.
Macroom was no different to anywhere else.
Yeah, it's interesting, Michael, that those that were executed were afforded the courtesy of a firing squad.
Yes.
I think of Churchill when he said, "Grass grows quickly over a battlefield, but never over a scaffold."
Yes, yes.
People weren't hanged. They were shot, and in a sense, that was affording them a dignity. Now, Michael, we're going to call a halt there, if I may, because I know this is going to be a very exciting talk. It's on Friday the 18th of March at 11 o'clock in Macroom Library.
That's right.
And you will have loads of information, and there'll be loads of opportunity for people to ask questions, no doubt.
Obviously.
Yeah, and I think it's really a great opportunity for people of the area, probably the only opportunity really, to come and talk about the Rising to somebody who has made it a study. And when I say made it a study, you have, this is your book here, which is on the Irish Volunteers, from 1915 to, is it 1922 you have on it? Or what's
No,
92?
to
I left it on it around
yes,
to
yes,
see it.
to some
because,
90. Well,
you take it up to the Civil War.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. So that's, of course, there's a copy of that here in Macroom Library, and it's available in the local bookshops also,
That's right.
Michael, I presume.
That's right.
When did you write this? Is it
No,
this
no,
year's?
no. It was in
1921.
it was in 1995 or 1994, I think.
1994,
Yeah.
yeah. Michael, thanks very much
Thanks
for
very
coming
much
in
indeed.
and filling us in on this.
Thanks
and
very much.
we'll all be looking forward to that talk. I must certainly
Thanks very
take a
much.
note of it myself and make sure that I turn up for it. So, Michael Galvin and son, agus sé chaint nish mar jólar airí amach, seachtain na cásca, nédiag is a sédiag.